A veteran once told me that the hardest part of being involved in the military was actually leaving it. It was such a daunting prospect of trying to transition back to civilian life, and it's almost a universal experience for veterans. Many struggle with it. Today, though, there is hope on the horizon. The government has released our first ever veteran transition strategy in the hope of better supporting veterans and their families to transition to civilian life. We thought we'd take a closer look at it this afternoon and get an understanding for what it might mean. And we're joined this afternoon by veteran David Neal. He left the Army in 2017 and is a successful entrepreneur. We've spoken to David previously about trying to get more veterans involved in small businesses, and he's with us on Drive today. David, thanks for your time.
Hey Adam, good to be with you again, and congratulations on being back behind the wheel, if I heard correctly.
Yeah, 5 weeks off with an early arrival, David. You might have missed that part, but all going well at home now. Take us through your experience, if you could, from being involved in the Army to suddenly finding yourself in civilian life. How big an adjustment was that for you?
Yeah, look, it was a bit of a mixed results, frankly. I was tapped on the shoulder somewhat by a doctor after spending years in the infantry corps, and essentially got told, hey, look, your back, knees, ankles and body, generally speaking, are not in the best state of repair, and so was given the ultimatum to switch within the Army to another role, or to leave, and I opted to leave at that point, and so that was back in 2017, and from there I was in quite an operational role at the time, and so time in terms of transition was limited, and was in a somewhat of a leadership role, and so felt somewhat obligated in order to work right close to the end, and that obviously limited the ability to capitalise on a number of the opportunities that are afforded to people in the transition process. Ultimately did transition, moved into a non-for-profit aged care sector, working on large-scale software projects, which was a bit of a cultural jump and an expectation jump. And frankly, look, that probably wasn't my best year. There were, personal choices made during that time, during that period of change from one environment to the other, where I probably could have made better personal choices. My health probably degraded a little bit. I didn't capitalise on all the services that were available to me. I probably could have done a bit more research in certain areas in order to make that transition process a little bit smoother. But fortunate for me, I was surrounded by some great mentors who then kind of slapped me back onto the straight and narrow. And then from there, the rest is history. We created the 8th Mile Consulting, and from there have gone on to, strengthen other people and hire a large number of veterans in the various roles and projects that we support. So a bit of ups and downs, a bit of a roller coaster journey, but a lot of lessons learned.
Are there any common challenges or barriers that you reckon face many, David, that are leaving defence after a defence life, after a career in the Defence Force? Yeah.
Look, frankly, there are. And I think responsibility kind of sits on both sides of the fence on this one. Not dissimilar from the journey I just described. I think within the veteran community, particularly for those that are transitioning, you'll see the development or the emergence of two kind of groups or mindsets. So you'll get veterans who are taking a slow and methodical and pragmatic approach to that transition. They're giving it the seriousness it deserves. They're doing the research. They're doing the preparation. And then on the other side, and I'm talking subjectively here, but also from positions of leadership after having been an officer and working with many, many different ranks and individuals, you often find also that there are some people that have, had a lot of environmental pressure put on them within the service. There's no surprises there. And maybe they haven't responded, and they respond in a knee-jerk reaction, and they accelerate their transition process, maybe at their own detriment. And so from the veteran personal responsibility perspective, I think there's a discussion to be had there, and there's guidance and mentoring to be done particularly to slow that process down for those individuals who might be like, I'm over this, I'm out. And then concurrently, there's, I think, another discussion from an organisational or strategic perspective. And the argument would be, that there are always 1% improvements and incremental improvements to be made in the services available to people. At least to my own mind, I don't think I fully capitalised on all the available services that were there. There is a feeling within the veteran community that you don't want to be an impost on others, and therefore you want to be low drag and you don't want to be the person holding the rest of the team back, particularly if they're focusing on operational or training demands. And as a result, you might be less inclined to ask the questions that you need to ask. And organisationally, we might not be rewarding those behaviours as much as we could. So seeing the emergence of this new review, the veteran transition strategy, it was positive to see that they're looking at, I guess, normalising some of those transition hurdles in terms of expectations, and also maybe encouraging them to lengthen that period of time in order to make use of the available services.
Hearing here from David Neal, a former Army veteran. We're discussing this first veteran transition strategy, which is a joint initiative between Defence, the Department of Veteran Affairs and the Commonwealth Superannuation Corporation. It involved consultation with current and ex-serving ADF members. David, it's only just been released, but on first pass, is there something positive that's jumped out at you and something you think that needs to be looked at further that maybe hasn't been addressed?
Yeah, look, in the first instance, I'm not one to sit on the outskirts or in with the crowd throwing slings and arrows at the person in the arena. So kudos to Matt Keogh and his team from DVA for actually having a crack and trying to improve things. There are always improvements to be made on top of improvements, but at least in the first instance, recognition should be given to those actually trying to improve a situation which they think needs care and attention. So kudos to them. Looking at the content itself, I think there's a very good focus towards families. Oftentimes veterans get mentioned, less often families get mentioned, and frankly, a veteran, whilst they're serving, can't really achieve what they need to achieve without, generally speaking, the support of at least family and friends who are holding the fort, so to speak, back on the home front. And so it was really good to read within this document that there is a focus towards family. And let's be honest, if we can improve the family situation, logic would suggest that that's going to improve the veteran who is transitioning. So that's a win-win. In terms of areas that it might have been lacking, at least on the first glance as only just been released, I think there is another discussion, and I kind of alluded to it before, around personal responsibility from the veteran perspective. I've had various roles within various support groups for veterans who have transitioned, as well as those who have dealt with the darker ends of post-traumatic stress, as well as major depressive disorders and everything in between. And one of the guiding features that supports, not disables, but supports those individuals in coming to terms with a successful transition into civilian life is the realization that they need to make better choices at a personal level, and they need to act within things that they can control and influence. And so I didn't see a lot of that in this document. This is a strategic document. It is geared towards government and it is geared towards services. But if we're looking at the problem holistically, there is a reasonably good argument to suggest that the next iteration might focus towards focusing less on safety and more on strength and personal accountability for the veterans themselves.
David, thanks for joining us this afternoon. As you say, only released today, so it's something that you've just had a look at for us, but obviously you've had plenty of experience working with veterans that have transitioned. You've had your own experience as well, which you've shared with us this afternoon. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Adam. All the best.
Thanks. That's David Neal. He's based on the Sunshine Coast, left the Army in 2017 and founder of 8th Mile Consulting. The time now is 8 minutes to 4.